There we go. Audio issue should be fixed. And we're good. All right, so welcome to the show, everyone. We are live on Blog Talk Radio. We are live on YouTube. We're live on Facebook. We're live in the Rates and Lanes group. This is the Rates and Lanes group podcast, all about starting your business. Tonight, I want to talk about setting up a new business, structuring your business, a business plan, getting your authority, whether it's being a carrier or a broker, and getting customers. We're going to talk about all of that tonight. Numbers at the bottom of the screen. Call in 917-889-9924. The lines are open. Let me make sure I get the switchboard up here. Elizabeth is in the other room screening calls. If you have any questions, comments, it is like a call-in radio show. Give us a call. You don't just jump on the phone, so don't be afraid. She will get your name and what you want to talk about, and I'll bring you on as soon as we get to that part of the show. I get a lot of questions, either in emails or in the different Facebook groups or just phone calls in general, and about how do I set up my business? Where do I start? How much does it cost? Should I be an LLC? Should I be a corporation? Should I factor? Should I buy a truck? Should I get authority? Do I lease to somebody? Do I need authority if I lease to somebody? I have authority. Do I need to be a broker to get customers? What do I need? What do I do first? Where do I start? Why do I do it? Etc., etc., etc. The list goes on. A lot of questions. There are brand new people to the industry that ask some very basic questions, and there are people that are 30, 40, 50 years experience in this industry that ask some very basic questions. So it's not unique to anyone in particular. Don't feel bad if you are experienced and you have some questions that you might feel are newbie questions. If you're just making a transition in your business, maybe you've been a carrier, an owner operator, maybe you're running a fleet and you're trying to make some changes in your business and you need some direction with that. That's what this show is about, because you're starting a new direction, a new business, whatever it is. This is the show tonight. And I want to talk about the differences and the different types of structure. I mentioned, do I want to be an owner-operator, lease to a carrier? Do I want to get my authority? Do I want to become a broker? Even questions about, do I need to get a license to be a broker? I want to work under another brokerage. Do I need a license? How do I go about getting a license? Do I have to go to school? Do I have to get some kind of a certification? Or to become a carrier, what do I need? How do I do it? If I'm a broker, how do I get direct customers? Do I talk to other brokers? Is there a load board for brokers? I'm a carrier, but I want to get direct customers. Does that mean I need to become a broker to go out and make sales calls and get these direct customers? And we're going to answer all of that, all of it. And those are all great questions. And some of them, though, and other things are a little bit confusing. If you are a carrier, can you get broker authority under your carrier name? If you're a broker, can you add assets? That's another big thing. That carriers think they only want to work with brokers that have their own assets, or shippers might think they only want to work with brokers that have their own assets. that gets a little bit tricky nowadays. So we'll talk about that as well. Let me make sure we don't have any stuff going in the background here. All right, I'm streaming on all these different channels, so it's a little bit difficult for me to see the all of the different comments coming in. So again, the easiest way to ask your question, call the phone number 917-889-9924. Looks like we have several people watching on the different channels here, and Elizabeth is still sharing some of this out. Normally we go live at 7 o'clock. I mentioned last show we did was 2 weeks ago. I mentioned I was going to try to do this every week, and last week was the Thanksgiving holiday, so we postponed it until this week due to the holiday. We're back today, and again, I won't be able to do consistent times or dates, but here we are. It's a little early. I want to kick things off today. We always go long on this show, so rather than stay super late, I thought it'd be a better idea to get a little bit of an early start. So I don't want to go too much more than an hour if we can help it, but keep your questions coming in and we'll get them all answered. Let me get the Facebook feed open so I can see what's going on over there as well. Sometimes it's easier just to watch one channel at a time, but I want to make sure that we get this out everywhere. So let's see. I'm not seeing any messages coming through, and that might be a problem on my end. So it may be the only way you can ask me a question is on the phones if the comments aren't coming through over here. Let's see what's going on. Can I get a comment or a thumbs up? It looks like I can see that people are watching, but I'm not seeing any comments. And again, I think that might be an issue on my end here. All right, let's see. Bear with me. Here, okay. So we've got a video going here. There we go. I'm a company driver and would like to become an owner-operator. What's your advice? And we're definitely, that is the show tonight. So Martin, that's the first question I've seen. There we go. Now I'm seeing this stuff coming in. And what's your method for hiring drivers? And we've got some thumbs up here. Okay. All right. So I know I'm getting out there. So we've got progress. We've got YouTube and Facebook coming in. Sounds good. Okay, guys. Again, what I want to talk about today, and this is tonight's show, getting your business started. Whether that is becoming an owner-operator, leasing to a carrier, or starting a carrier, getting your authority, or becoming a broker, or a combination of one of those. Maybe you're buying your first truck and you're becoming a carrier with your own authority. Or maybe you are a carrier and you want to add brokerage authority. Or maybe you are looking to get into the industry. Another big topic lately has been dispatch services. You want to start a dispatch service. What does that mean? Where do you start? How do you go about that? What kind of training do you need? We'll talk about that. And then we'll have some random questions at the end. We'll get to that as well. So, all right. So the first thing that I tell everyone, every single person that calls me for advice is, what does your business plan say about that? It's always my first question. What does your business plan say about that? You want to go buy a truck, become an owner-operator. What does your business plan say about that? Now, if you're asking questions in the various Facebook groups and so forth because you're doing some research, trying to figure out how to go about your next step, that's fine. But unfortunately, the biggest problem that most drivers have is they don't think the whole problem through. I've actually seen people say, I just bought my first truck. Now what? I just spent $50, $80, $100, $150,000 on my first truck. I am an owner operator today. I bought my first truck. What do I do? Now what? Do I need to get authority? Peeking a little on the sound there. So do I need to get my authority? Do I need to become a broker? Where do I get customers? Do I have to find loads on the load board? What do I do? How do I do it? I just bought the truck. The title's in my name. I've got the truck now. What do I do? And that is so backwards. That is such backwards thinking. You should never make an investment in your business until you even know what your business is. And if you don't have a plan, you don't have a structure, you don't have anything in place, you don't know what your business even is, why would you go out and buy equipment? That would be no different than saying, hey guys, I just went out and bought this $500,000 super specialized machine to make these widgets. And I can make these widgets. Who needs a widget? Why would you go out and spend this $500,000 for this machine to make widgets if you don't even know what to do with the widget? And that's the same thing that happens when people go out and buy a truck, whether it's an old used truck or they're getting their authority, they don't know how to get customers, they haven't done any of that research. You have a widget, but you don't know what a widget even is. You don't know what to do with the widget. And that's what you're doing. You're putting the cart before the horse. So before you do anything, write a business plan. Some people will come to me and they'll say, hey, I just set up my corporation or I set up my LLC. Now what? Well, what do you mean now what? What does your business plan say? What are you doing with your business? Are you becoming a carrier? Do you have multiple trucks? Do you have employees? Do you have drivers? What are you doing next? Why did you start this LLC or this corporation? What are you trying to do with it? Maybe you don't even need that. Somebody somewhere told you, maybe you read it in one of these trade journals, that you need to go out and do it. It'll save all your assets. You don't have a business yet. You don't have any structure. You don't have any customers yet, but you're putting the cart before the horse, worried about saving your assets. Now, an attorney might say that should be the first thing you do. And if you're starting a business, maybe that is one of the first things you should start with. But before you even start, you need to plan for it. Patton did not invade Europe in World War II just willy-nilly, just said, hey guys, let's just go over there and see what happens. He made a plan. You're not going to take over the world with your new business if you don't have a plan. So that's where I want to start. We're going to talk about LLCs. We're going to talk about corporations and sole proprietors. We're going to talk about being a carrier, an owner-operator, leasing to a carrier. If you're a carrier and you want to lease on owner-operators, and if you want to become a broker, you want to get direct customers, we're going to talk about all of that stuff in this show. But we can't talk about any of it because none of it matters at all until you have a plan. So we're going to start talking right now about a business plan. And I see one of the first comments over here on the Facebook feed. Martin says, I'm a company driver and would like to become an owner-operator. What's your advice? So to answer that question, first and foremost, my advice is start with a business plan. Plan for it. You want to become an owner-operator, plan for it. And that plan should be in writing. You should have a formal plan. Write down what are your options. Where will you get the truck? Where will you get the work? How will you generate money? What exactly is the service that you're providing? Who are your customers and why? Why do they need you? Why do you want to become an owner-operator? Does anybody need you to be an owner-operator? Have you thought about that? Obviously, people are hiring owner-operators, but why are they hiring owner-operators? Have you gone to ask, what do you need owner-operators for? You have direct customers, you have an abundance of freight that you just don't have enough trucks for, and that's why you're hiring owner-operators? Or the most common thing I see these days is a new owner-operator, or a new carrier rather, with their own authority, or a year or two in business, and they say, I'm going to let people run my numbers. I'm just going to let people, what should I charge somebody to run under my numbers? What kind of a business plan is that? You're going to let them run your numbers? Have you figured out what the risk is? Do you even know what that means to let them run your numbers? And when you say you're going to charge them, I don't recall any owner-operator ever writing me a check. Nobody has ever paid me to run my numbers. As a carrier, you are paying them. And if you don't understand that business relationship, you will have an uphill battle trying to be successful. And I think I'm peaking on my sound here, so let me adjust that real quick here. think that should take care of it. All right, phone lines are open. Make sure I'm watching the switchboard first. We do have a few calls on 917-889-9924. So I want to start with a business plan. And I've done shows in the past about what a business plan really is and how to start it. And you can go back through the YouTube channel and so forth, find that. But let's talk about that right now. I'm going to refer you to the most basic business startup source anywhere. And there are so many free resources that it's unbelievable. And I don't think a fraction of the owner-operators or new businesses in transportation ever visit this site. A lot of free stuff. SBA.gov, Small Business Administration.gov. I just printed a couple of these off because normally before a show I take some notes just to kind of keep myself on track, but I didn't need to take notes. I literally just printed off the outline or the structure of what a business plan should be. And this is basically what I would have taken notes on. So I'm going to just go down through this. Now the SBA has two different versions of a business plan. They've got the more traditional, what most people have always used, the traditional business plan format, which is what I would recommend definitely if you are getting your authority, becoming a broker, if you're going to be soliciting customers. You need to have a little more planning. And really, for any new business, this is where it should be, the traditional business plan. But they also have something that's kind of neat and I think would work fairly well, especially in the preliminary stages. Everybody could kind of start here and grow their plan from there. And that's the lean startup format. And these are both illustrated. I printed both of these off right from the SBA.gov. I thought it was a great resource and a great way to explain this. But the lean startup format would be good for an owner-operator that might be leasing to a carrier. It doesn't have a lot of detail that they need in their business, but it's definitely a good idea to have at least that for any business. And again, it's a good place to start and then expand from there, a traditional business plan. Now, a business plan for a carrier should probably be at a minimum 10, maybe 15 pages, because you have a lot of things you need to discuss, believe it or not. And there's a lot of things that you might think are common knowledge, but if I was to ask you a question like, what is your relationship with your customers? Before you've even started your business, how are you going to communicate with your customers? Have you thought that through? What kind of interaction will you have? Once you go knock on their door and they say, yes, here's the business, then what? Have you thought that through? Because that kind of stuff can be talked about in your business plan. Now, it starts with an executive summary. That's the front page, the cover page, explains all about your business, what you are, who you are, what you do, why you do it, and the value that you bring, okay? It's the first page. That should summarize everything you need to know. And really, that is the most important page, and it's the very last thing that you would write, okay? The next thing, so literally, you'd make the executive summary your cover page of your business plan. Your first page when you open it up, executive summary. Next one is your company description, detailed information. What problem does your business solve? You are an owner-operator. From the Facebook feed, I'm a company driver. I want to become an owner-operator. So what I see in that question is, I want to start a new business. And just as I said, why? What problem are you trying to solve to start this new business? You will be doing what? Now, another important thing to know is, and it gets confusing in transportation, in trucking, what is your role in the business? As an owner-operator, what service do you provide? Let's see. No sound I see from YouTube. Can we verify that we've got sound? Somebody can give me a thumbs up or... Sound is good. Okay. All right. Thank you. Somebody commented that there was no sound. So you'll have a company description, and that you need to be very, very specific. As specific as possible. List out the consumers, organization, and the businesses that your company plans to serve. So again, as an owner-operator, what problem are you solving? Who will you be leasing to? Who will your customer be? Now, an owner-operator, most of the time when I ask an owner-operator who their customers are, who is your customer as an owner-operator? And if anybody can answer that, I'm going to move on for a second. I'm going to come back to it. Answer that in any of the feeds here, if I can see one of them. Who is your customer as an owner-operator? And what exactly, if you are an owner-operator, what service do you provide? As an owner-operator, who is your customer and what service do you provide? This is a question that very, very few people understand or can answer correctly. As an owner-operator, what service do you provide and who is your customer? Now, explain the competitive advantages that will make your business a success. What can you do better than anybody else? Anybody can go buy a truck today without even ever seeing a truck in person. Could go buy a truck today. Could take the CDL road test tomorrow, get their CDL, get their authority activated. As soon as it's active, go to work under their own authority with their own truck. What will you do to compete with that? Anybody can do it. The barrier to entry in this business is extremely low. What will you do to compete with all of the other businesses that are out there? How can you do it better? What service can you provide that they can't? I can tell you that one of the most successful new carriers that I've ever helped get started had zero experience in the trucking business. He was a business person. That was the key to his success. He understood what we're talking about here. He understood how to develop a business and not just own a job. You've probably heard that term before. Do you want to be a business owner or do you want to own a job? All right, so I've got an answer here from YouTube. So the question was, who is your customer and what services do you provide? So from YouTube, Jackknife TV says, the carrier is the customer and or the shipper and broker. You provide transportation and service. You're part right. Your only customer is the carrier that you are leased to. The shipper and broker are that carrier's customer. Now you, as an agent for that carrier, you are servicing the broker and the shipper on the carrier's behalf. But that carrier has allowed you to represent them to service their customer. You, the only person that you have to please is your carrier. If your carrier is happy because you told off their shipper, then great, you've pleased your customer. The shipper and broker are their customer. It's their problem. Now, you provide transportation and service. Is that really what you provide? You really provide transportation and service? Because carriers move freight. Owner-operators don't necessarily move freight. Owner-operators lease trucks. When a carrier leases a truck, now this is part of the answer to my what do I charge owner-operators to run under my numbers? Carriers lease trucks to add capacity. They could lease those trucks from Penske or Ryder, or they could lease it from an owner-operator. Now, the only difference is an owner-operator usually provides a driver as well. But the only thing an owner-operator is doing, the only service they provide, is they are leasing a truck and a driver to a carrier. That's it. They're not providing transportation service. The driver drives the truck. The carrier is using that truck how they see fit. Now, don't get me wrong. A carrier may delegate some of these duties down the totem pole and allow the driver to dispatch themselves or work with different customers and so forth. And you provide your equipment. So the only thing that an owner-operator does is they provide equipment and a driver. The driver is a contractor, and in a roundabout way, yes, you're moving freight and you're providing the transportation service and you're providing just overall customer service, but as an agent for that carrier. But that carrier could just as easily go out and rent a truck from Ryder and hire a driver to do the exact same job. Now, as an owner-operator, if you are in the business of leasing trucks, does that change your perspective on what you want to, what type of equipment you want to buy, what services you want to provide? Would you have an easier time renting a 1970 era old, Mac DM series with a 2-speed stick on the floor that gets 2 miles to the gallon? Or would you have an easier time renting a 2021 Peterbilt 389 or something to that effect, all chromed out? What would the carrier like more? If it was the same cost to the carrier, obviously the carrier would prefer the nicer of the two, right? Because you represent them. They want to see that nice equipment on the road. Of course, as an owner-operator, you could buy an older truck and you could make just as much money and you could have a great business that way. It's all in the planning. But what do you want to do? What customers do you want to work with? I can promise you that there are some elite carriers that will not work with you if you have older equipment. They will not work with you if you have ugly equipment or, a wounded gazelle running down the road. They just won't do it. I won't do it at Patriot Star. If you roll in and your truck looks like it's held together with bubble gum and duct tape, I can't bring you on. That being said, I don't have an age limit. If you have a nice old truck that's, beautifully restored and just immaculate, that's great. I don't have a problem with that. And I think something like that is kind of cool. But I don't want to see a piece of garbage rolling down the road either. So your equipment does matter. You are providing equipment. Next would be on your business plan. That was under company description, market analysis. Now, this goes back to what Martin said on Facebook. I'm a company driver, want to become an owner-operator. What's your advice? The market analysis. You need a good understanding of your industry. And again, I'm kind of reading this verbatim off the SBA.gov website, and I'm elaborating myself. And competitive research will show you what other businesses are doing and what their strengths are. In your market research, look for trends and themes. What do successful competitors do? Why does it work? What can you do better? And answer those questions in your market analysis. Again, if you want to become an owner-operator, what service do you want to provide? And we're going to get into further down the line here, what kind of investment will you be making up front? Will you be buying newer equipment? Do you want to service the high-end customers? Right now, obviously, the concerts and things are kind of in the toilet. None of that's happening because of COVID-19. But some of those customers, you want to get on a tour with Garth Brooks or Carrie Underwood did a tour last year. All these different big names, and you tour with them. They don't want to see a garbage truck rolling down the road. They want to see some immaculate, pristine, beautiful piece of equipment with their name on it because you're pulling their trailer with their logos all over it. They want to see that. So you need to figure out who your customer is going to be before you go buy a truck. Even if you want to work maybe for one of the moving van lines, they particularly want certain color trucks. So maybe you need a yellow truck or a white truck or something like that. So before you go buy equipment, you really need to know who your customer will be. Organization and management. So another question, do I need an LLC if I'm leasing onto a company? I know the phone just rang here in the office. We do have calls. Let me remind you. We do have calls on the line. If you have a question or comment, anything you'd like to add to the show, go ahead and press number 1 on your keypad, and that will raise your hand, and Elizabeth will screen your call here in a few minutes. So go ahead and press number 1 if you have anything you want to add there. And if you are watching and you want to call in and you have anything you'd like to add, 917-889-9924. The phone lines are open. We do have some callers on. They just need to press 1 if they want to add anything to the show. All right, so organization and management. Do I need an LLC to become an owner-operator? Not necessarily. It depends on what you're doing. In fact, most of the time, I would recommend that you do not start an LLC or corporation or anything, and I'll get to that at the end here as to why. It might be something that's advisable depending on your financial investment and so forth, but it does not provide a lot of protection as far as asset protection up front. It may, if you're adding multiple trucks over the first couple of years, it might make sense. Or if you're starting your authority, if you have drivers in your truck, but it's not necessarily the greatest thing right up front. A lot of carriers, especially smaller carriers lately, are paying their drivers on 1099s, and they want their drivers to be an LLC. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to jump through some loopholes, and we're going to get to this. I'm getting ahead of myself here. They're trying to jump through loopholes to pay these drivers on 1099s when they're actually W-2 employees, and it doesn't work that way. So we'll talk about that here in a few minutes as well. So your organization, it should include what type of structure will you be? A sole proprietor, partnership, which I don't recommend a partnership at all, an LLC, a corporation. Who will the owners be? Will it be just you? Will it be you and your spouse? Will it be you and a friend or cousin or brother? Who will the owners be? What structure? And who will be the manager? Who will be in charge of what division, so to speak, of the company? What will the roles of each person be? And all of that should be under organization and management. And the service or product line is the next description here. Describe what you sell or what service you offer. Explain how it benefits your customers and what the product lifestyle looks like. Share your plans for intellectual property like copyright or patent filings. If you're doing research and development for your service or product, explain it in detail. So you are leasing your truck. Is there any other service that you can provide that will generate revenue? So in my case, for example, I have my own authority. I have trucks leased under us, but I also do warehousing and storage. We started a brokerage on a separate company as a brokerage. We can arrange for transportation, and the two can work side by side. All of that stuff is detailed in what we can do. I've got multiple locations now. I've got an office here in Florida where I'm at now. I've got another up in Tennessee, and that allows us some flexibility for training drivers and so forth. That's all part of the services that I can offer. Marketing and sales is the next thing. This is a big one. Where will you get your customers? Now, if you are leasing to a carrier, that is your customer. And if they have enough freight to move and they have enough need for you, or however their pay structure works, that's your customer, and that's great. And you're set. Keep in mind that you can have more than one customer even as an owner-operator. You could have multiple trucks leased to multiple carriers. You could have multiple trucks leased to one carrier. You could lease your truck to a carrier for a week and lease it to another carrier the next week. Now, you'd have to break the lease. You'd have to jump through and get drug testing and go through all that stuff, which is why it doesn't happen often, but you could. So maybe in the wintertime, you run for one company, and then when the spring hits, you go run agricultural products, and through harvest, and then wintertime, you go run your winter job. And you could do multiple carriers or multiple different trucks or different jobs. You could have multiple different customers. So keep that in mind. Who will they be and why? A lot of farmers have trucks that they run through the harvest season, and they go lease those trucks to carriers during the off season to keep the profits going for that truck so they can afford to keep the truck sitting around the rest of the time. Marketing and sales, another thing is, do you plan to just get your loads off of a load board? Do you plan on making calls? Do you have a customer? Before I went and got my own authority, we had a direct customer. Before we got our authority, we had a direct customer. We obviously didn't pull any freight for them until we got authorized, but we had a customer that said, yes, as soon as you're ready to go, we've got freight for you. Do you have that? If you're getting your authority, if you are leasing to a carrier, have you set up when you will be starting, what type of trailer you'll be pulling, how many miles you'll be running, what exactly your job will entail? And Martin says he's leased to a company now. Is he going to, I'm sorry, he's driving as a company driver for a company now. He wants to lease to a carrier. Is he going to be leasing to the same carrier? If that's the case, that's the best market research you can do because you already know the type of freight they move. You already know what the owner-operators will be faced with. You already know the type of trailers. You've probably already worked with the same type of equipment. Funding requests. Where will you get funding? Now, I saw somebody on I believe in the YouTube, let's see, it was on one of these comments, that they have a business plan, but they got it from a factoring company. Unfortunately, factoring companies try to lure you in with their version of what you need. and it's a sales pitch for them. And I'll explain that in a little bit. You do not need factoring. This is another big thing that I get up front. I just got my authority. I need to sign up with a factoring company. Where do I start? I was told that I have to have a factoring company because the factoring companies will tell you you have to have them, but that's not the case. In fact, I highly advise against it. I've had drivers lease to me, and I tell everyone, if you lease to me, I'm happy if you move upward and onward, you get your own authority, you do your own thing. And it's so disappointing sometimes when I see some of them go out and they start factoring. I have had some owner-operators that were leased to me that were paycheck to paycheck. They really were struggling. They went and got their own authority and thought for sure that they would need to go factor, and they did not, and they made it successful, and I was very, very proud. Now, on the other side of that, I've had some owner-operators that were bringing killer money in, had a great structure at home, and they went and got their own authority, and they started factoring, and they didn't need to. And I think there's a sales pitch that these factoring companies that throw out, and it hooks too many people with misinformation. So the funding, where will your funding come from? How will it work? If you are leased to a carrier, you don't need factoring. You need to work with that carrier on payment. There are rules and laws on how a carrier needs to pay you. A carrier has to pay you within 15 days. By law, they have to pay you within 15 days of the date that you submit the paperwork to them for payment. So you submit all the bills, documents, everything they need for billing. They have to pay you within 15 days. If you are a carrier and you're working direct with a shipper, I can tell you right now, the shippers that you want to be working with, most of them, almost every shipper that we work with, we hand them an invoice. They hand us a check. They already had the check printed. They knew exactly what they owed us. They hand us a check at the same time. I mentioned when I first started, I had a direct customer before I even got my authority. They were so bad, and I was new. I was still getting my accounting and all my systems set up. I was using QuickBooks at the time, and I had a system where I would pull a load, I would enter it in QuickBooks, I would create the invoice, I would send it to the customer, they'd send me a check, I'd enter the check, I'd receive the money, and so forth, the whole process. I was brand new, so I had to go down this list, and it had to be in this order. They had the nerve to pay me before I even moved a load. How do I handle that? That was a problem. I had a direct customer that paid before I even moved the load. They would have a check waiting for me when I arrived, before I even picked the load up. I actually had to say, look, can we just hold off? Pay me at the end of the week. It would be better if you just pay me at the end of the week. Let me at least figure out my system first. Back up. Slow down. I actually had to ask my customer to pay me slower because they paid me so fast I wasn't ready for it. All of my direct customers that I can think of pay almost immediately after receiving an invoice. I think I've got one customer that will pay, and I take that back. All of my direct customers pay immediately after receiving an invoice. I have one customer that we only invoice occasionally. So we might have multiple loads that we moved, and we send an invoice for multiple loads, and they send a check as soon as they get that invoice. But we've moved enough loads with them that it didn't make sense to invoice after every single one. It was just a paperwork issue. Kind of like I said in the beginning, slow down. Too many people get their authority and immediately think they have to factor because that's the way that their funding will work. If you're working with brokers, almost every broker nowadays has QuickPay, and most of them are cheaper than factoring. All of the new tech companies are free QuickPay. A lot of the big brokerages will pay in really, really short terms. 7 days. You deliver a load, and the following Friday, you get paid. As a carrier, they're a broker. You get paid weekly. Some of the big brokers, Mercer is one, for example. They will pay you same day. If you get the paperwork in early enough, same day or next day, they will pay you at no additional cost, no additional charge. They will pay you right away. You don't need to factor that. Or there's others that'll pay you in a week. Uber, Convoy, JB Hunt now, they'll pay you at no charge. You just have to use their app to move the load. There's no reason to factor that. So a lot of other brokers, 1.5%, 2%, 2.5%, 3%. And most of the factoring companies are going to lock you in at somewhere in the 3 to 5% range if you only have one truck. So it's actually cheaper not to do that. And I highly recommend you don't factor. So do a little bit of research on who your customers will be. And it's easy to know that if you just call a couple of the brokers that you'll work with most frequently before you even get your authority and figure out what their pay terms are, or if they offer quick pay, or if they offer what their normal payment terms are. Another thing to ask is, do they do ACH? So if somebody does ACH and they pay you next day, you literally have the money in your bank account the next day. Some of them will pay you next day, but they put a check in the mail. So it takes a week or 2 weeks to get the check in the mail, and then you got to put it in the deposit slip and all that. But literally, some of them ACH next day in your bank. You don't need factoring for that. Explain also how much funding you're going to need in the future. So you have a truck. How will you cash flow your business? So once you have the money coming in, how much will you set aside for maintenance and your driver pay and all your expenses? How will that work? And that should all be laid out in your funding. And then your financial projections is the next one. Looks like we have a question on the phones. We'll get to it in just a minute. So caller, hold tight. Okay. And so the next one is financial projections. What kind of money will you be making? Caution, warning. I need a big orange thing to flash on the screen. Warning, warning, warning. Do not make financial projections on today's market. We are on top of a mountain. We are at the highest pinnacle point of that peak right now. The rates are record high. We haven't seen volumes like this ever. And a lot of it is because of the slinky effect and back and forth from the COVID stuff. We're still under an emergency state of emergency on the federal level. We still have shortages in some areas. We still have some industries shut down. I mentioned trade shows and concerts are shut down. We have a screwed up market right now. Do not base your financial projections on today's market or the 2020 market. Use some historical information. Go back, get DAT, get FreightWave Sonar, get truckstop.com, whatever it is. Use some information from those historical data. 2019 was a more normal year. 2018 was another record-setting year, so that's kind of hard. Between 2015 and 2020, pretty much throw out 2020 and 2018. Throw them out. 15, 16, 17, and 19 were all pretty standard years. Use some of the averages and projections from those to lay out what you want. And use some rock bottom prices. So what you might actually include from 2020 is the absolute extreme lows that we saw on the spot market in April, May, June timeframe when the bottom fell out of the market because of all the shutdowns. That could happen again, and explain what would happen to your business if it did. How could you survive? All right, so all of that needs to be in your business plan. And then, like I mentioned, the executive summary is the very last thing you write. Go back through, summarize. Each one of these sections that I mentioned should be at least 1 or 2 pages. Each one of those should take you 1 or 2 pages to write out, or more, but at least 1 or 2 pages. Then go back and summarize in 1 or 2 sentences from each one of those pages and create your executive summary. That will be your first page. As I mentioned, executive summary is the last thing you write, but it's the cover page to your entire business plan. Should lay out everything. I should be able to read your executive summary and say, yep, you'll do. You're going to make it. You're going to work out. Your business will be successful. And it says so right there. The other option for SBA.gov, and I'm just going to blow through this quickly because this needs to be something that most of you can maybe start with to kind of get the ball rolling on a business plan, but a lean startup format under SBA business plans. Key partnerships is an important one, and this is why I say that this is a good one if you want to lease to a carrier. Key partnerships. Who will be your key partners in business, meaning your main customers? If you are an owner-operator, leasing to a carrier, that carrier. And what is their structure like? Define how your relationship with them will work. Or if you're getting your own authority, the shippers and receivers that you might be working with, the customers that you'll be working with, or brokers. I recommend before you even get your authority that you reach out to a handful of brokers, get their core business model in mind, get their business, their setup packets. You don't even have your authority yet. You can get their contracts, read through them, see how it works, look everything over, Maybe you do lease to a carrier like Patriot Star where you can work with some of them up front and you understand how that works. So when you go to write your business plan, you know what that relationship will be like. Your key activities, what you will do day to day, your operations, key resources, obviously your equipment, but how will you get your equipment fixed? What types of shops will you use? Do you have a network of shops? Do you have a fuel card provider? Do you have any of this stuff? Is some of it provided by the carrier? What can you source on your own? The value proposition. What do you provide to that carrier that every other owner operator doesn't have? What is the key thing that sets you apart? Customer segments. Who is your target market? In transportation, it might be as simple as I'm going to just focus on flatbed or reefer, or maybe it's something more specific, like I'm going to focus on over-dimensional flatbed for certain types of customers, or I'm going to focus on pad wrap van freight for trade shows or concerts, and it'll be very specific. Your revenue streams, how will your company actually make money? Your cost structure. And this is a good one. You can explain how you will reduce your cost. So you can explain the types of fuel saving devices you'll use, maybe the routing information that you'll use, maybe the types of equipment that you'll focus on utilizing that will save maintenance. Instead of, I mentioned the 1970-something Mac versus a 2020, 2021 that has, a warranty and all modern parts that tend to last 1,000,000 miles versus, I remember I learned to drive in a 1979 Mac, and 250,000 miles, those trucks were considered worn out. And now 1,000,000 miles is kind of the standard before you even need to worry about major maintenance overhauls and things. All right. So again, those are business plan templates. You need to have that. If you don't have one, why not? Go out and write it down. So many owner-operators, I would say 99.9% of the people come into this office, sit down with me for some type of consultation, or they're a new owner-operator, new training, whatever it is, or they call on the phone, they need advice, or they ask like this Martin did on Facebook, I want to make this happen. I want to start a business. I want to do that. What do I do next? It's a business plan. Go ahead and write a business plan. There's nothing holding you back from writing a business plan. It doesn't cost anything. You can write it down. And here's the thing. You can write your business plan in pencil, and you can own a really, really big eraser because your business plan can change. But if you don't have it in writing and you don't even attempt to follow the path, who knows where you're going to end up. So start a business plan. Please, I promise you, it will give you success tenfold versus somebody that starts without a clue. All right? So we're going to go to Jerry on the phones. Maybe. There we go. Jerry, are you with us?
Hey, Mr. Long. Yeah, thank you.
All right, let me make sure we have plenty of good sound for you here. All right. How can we help you, Jerry?
So I really appreciate this show. I've learned a lot, and I just want to play fanboy here for just a moment. I really appreciate when you come on, and I've been able to avoid the siren song of factoring since I started my career a couple years ago.
Awesome.
And I had caught some of your videos along the way, maybe 6 months in when money was getting a little tight and I had all this money out in billing, and I'm like, okay, well, this guy sounds like he knows what he's talking about. I think I'm on the right path. And now that is no longer a problem. Anyway, I have a million things I could ask you, but I'm going to try and keep from going down a bunch of different rabbit trails. So as you discuss your carrier, I think, and the way that you see carriers operating and who their customers are, it seems like there's an awful lot of focus on direct freight, the carrier contracting with the shipper, or even if it's a handshake.
Right.
But there's an awful lot of focus on that. I picked up a lot of that through listening to your stuff before. Now, when I wrote my business plan, which was a requirement from my bank in order to get a loan, and I had been in business my whole life, I had never written an actual business plan. the major value I saw after it was all done was I learned so much. I think the bank manager made me write that so I would educate myself. So I
Absolutely.
just wanted to throw that in there.
That's why I tell people to do it.
But, yep. Well, in order for me to get any money, that's what was a requirement, and that helped it slide right through. I spent a few nights burning the candle at both ends while I was working a corporate job, doing that, and it served me well. So
Absolutely.
just a little kudos for you there. That was a big part of my business plan. It wasn't the exclusive part, but being able to market to direct shippers, for direct freight through shippers. Of course, the real learning happened when I got into the market, and I realized that where I live out in rural Colorado, there's really only a couple big shippers.
Mm-hmm.
And there's one small one, within, let's say, 100-mile radius of my house that are even an option.
Okay.
I did build a business relationship with one of the bigger ones. I figured out pretty quickly that he had a better bead on the market in that area than I did. He darn well knew exactly what, and I'm not trying to say I was trying to take advantage of him, but what I figured out really quickly was that the brokers were maybe making $25, $50, $150 on a good day over the cost of the loads that they were, that he was moving. He knew darn well what the market rates were,
right,
and that they move, and he probably knew them better than the brokers. So pretty quickly I learned that it really wasn't, especially as a one truck carrier, soon to be two. I have a driver coming on very shortly, an owner operator with their own equipment. But it seemed like the major advantage to having direct freight was that I could work closer to the house, as particularly as a one truck carrier. However, the downside was I was limiting myself from being available to those high dollar loads that would come up that need to get covered in the area, right? And I could also move to hotter markets and kind of move my truck where the money was. So I quickly abandoned that, and I only have, like I say, close to my house, a couple of shippers that could keep me busy, or keep soon to be my two trucks busy. So as much as I'd like to pick your brain about what I should do along the line of direct freight, I'd like to ask you more specifically, since I have limited time. As somebody who focuses primarily on the spot market, I view my customers as the shipper and the broker.
Okay.
Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah. Right.
Okay. What services can I provide to those guys that set me apart from my competition?
Okay. All right.
I mean, I'm already almost always on time. I mean, like 99% on time on both ends.
Okay.
I have excellent communication skills. I'm professional with everyone I deal with.
Okay.
Is there anything else that I can do?
There's a couple of things. First of all, I want to back up a little bit. So you have the direct customers that were nearby, and I want to kind of expand on a couple of things, a couple of thoughts there. First of all, and I get this a lot. Well, if I have direct customers, I'm locked into that, and I either the two biggest things are either what you just said, I'm stuck on their rates, and if some amazing stuff comes up, then I don't have the availability for it. Or they say, I like working spot market because I can work when I want to, and I don't have to jump and be at their beck and call. They have a contracted load that moves every week. If I want to take a week off, I can't, or something like that. So those are the two biggest things. So there's two things that you need to think about on that. First of all, while right now, for example, rates are phenomenal, and there's spot market rates are better in most areas than contract rates, which is hard to deal with sometimes. It's hard to see that I've been making, I'm making 220 a mile on this particular load. I could do the exact same lane if it was a broker for 250 or 260 or $3 a mile, right? I could do the exact same thing. Matter of fact, there was a customer that we were working with previously that, it was a set rate, and they send out tenders. Okay, if you're familiar, they'll send out an email of, can you cover these loads? And you have a set rate that you have already kind of predetermined, so you accept or reject. So you had the option. We weren't obligated to take the loads. We could reject them. Most of the time, though, they made sense. You accept the load because it's a phenomenal rate, because it's pre-negotiated contract and everything. But sometimes, especially during certain seasons, this is in Florida, so during seasonal times, it makes sense to haul a brokered load because that load doesn't pay as much. The thing is, I could reject that load, and then the next person they offered it to had a higher rate negotiated, but happened to be a broker. If they accepted it, they would offer it to me. I would be their first bid, and I could accept it from a broker at a higher rate than I could get it direct for myself, the exact same load. They would offer it to me first.
I'm following you.
The direct customer would offer it to me first because my rate was a little bit lower. If I couldn't cover it, they would go up a little bit and they would offer it to the next truck in line, which happened to be this broker, who would then turn around and offer it right back to me. But if it could bite me because I could turn it down and they might offer it to somebody else that was a lateral move from me. In other words, that, this would only work when rates are really, really good, because if I turn it down and that's the best thing around, another truck at my rate will grab it, right? But when rates are good, I could turn it down and I'd be the first call from this other broker and get it direct through, my direct customer through this broker load and get a better rate. The thing is, that only happens so many times before the shipper gets wise to it, right? So, you have to be careful. Now, that being said, there's other brokered loads that I could take. It doesn't have to be for that particular customer. So, on the other side of that, though, during the off season, I mentioned, in peak season, it made sense to do that, when produce was running out of Florida and stuff. But the rest of the year, that customer paid better than everything else. Everything else. So I would have owner-operators that did not want to haul that load during the peak season, but during the off season, they were begging for it. I turned it down so many times during the peak season that they dropped us, and now I don't have it in the off season. Okay? So in other words, and I remember the broker and everything who took it. But
I'm following you, but
yeah. Well, what I'm getting at is,
I'm completely following.
Yeah, what I'm getting at, and I'm talking to you, but I'm also explaining this to everybody else listening. Sometimes you have to.
Yeah, and I'm selfish, and I want to bring it back to my.
I'm coming. I'm getting around to it. Sometimes the consistency of that rate pays off in dividends over the long haul. Okay, so it makes sense to stick with it long term. Now, going back to your question though. One more.
I'd like to give you a little more background on the specific dynamics that I'm seeing play out in my little home market.
Okay.
If you're okay with that.
Sure.
So as I began to build a relationship with this one shipper in particular who could easily keep me and my other truck busy all the time, what I noticed was a lot of this take it or leave it. Right, which fluctuated dramatically with the market. So as there was few trucks in my area, or the weather conditions were bad, the rate went to. It was always a fair rate for what the market said.
Okay.
But it was not competitive to what I could do if I would find outbound stuff. I could make it work on a one-run deal and be profitable. The problem is it's going somewhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in order to get paid to come back in the vicinity of that shipper was hit or miss.
Gotcha.
So it was almost like I couldn't build them. I'm struggling to brainstorm a way to build a model off of it because I can't necessarily get back and still be profitable.
And another aspect to this is you have to vet customers. Okay, so a lot of people go out and they'll just take any customer that comes across because it's the only customer around. Like, in your case, geographically, it's the only customer relatively close, and it made sense to go after that customer. But it didn't pay enough, and it doesn't make sense. So you vet the customer, and sometimes the customer is not a good fit, and it's just not ideal for what you want. You don't have to take every customer that comes along. There are definitely brokers, especially new brokers and agents, and a new carrier with authority. They're just celebrating that they got their new customer, their first great customer. They're good to go. They've got a customer now, but they pay peanuts. And a lot of times, some of these any customer that's really easy to get into is probably going to pay peanuts. There are definitely there are definitely direct customers that post on load boards that a lot of new carriers will jump on because it's a direct customer. They see it's a direct shipper, and they're all excited. But the reason they were posting on a load board is because they were too cheap to pay a broker. And they are definitely in tune with what the brokers are doing and what the rates are paying. And they are cheaper than most of the broker loads. If you look on any load board anytime, you can find some of them. They're usually a lot of lumber or shingles or building materials, and it's the shipper direct stuff, but they are some of the cheapest loads on the board a lot of time. Granted, it's direct freight. It's direct. There's no broker involved, but a lot of times it's cheap. So you have to vet your customers as well. So you definitely hit on something there. The other thing I wanted to mention to you, though, you mentioned that in your home market, but have you looked at developing a dumbbell where you're in Colorado, maybe you look in, Texas or, Kansas or Missouri even, and you find something out there, and then you maybe take a broker load that gets you there, and then every time you're in that area, you have a direct customer to get you home. Or maybe it's a triangle, and you service another customer in a different area. Your direct customer doesn't have to be in your backyard. Matter of fact, we're in Florida, and one of our biggest direct customers is in Canada. So that's just something to consider. And not for you directly, but for... Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's definitely for me directly, whether you intended it or not. So, but to expand on that, if you were me and I see loads that I can get from time to time that are going, so Texas was a good example. So I'm on a load right now, which is actually going to Dallas, right?
Okay.
And then when I'm down there, I'm going to be scouring the board to find loads that are going to get me back as close to the house as I can, or as close to the shipper again as I can. I may or I may not find it. So once I have a shipper who's got a lane that's moving back and they're outside of my home market, what's the next step to go to approach that remote shipper and say, hey, I'm looking to cover. How do you get your foot in the door? Who do you ask for?
Okay. Well,
when it was at my home market, it was much easier.
Yeah. So it's more difficult now with this COVID stuff because you walk into their shipping office and everybody hits the ceiling because they're afraid you're going to contaminate everything, or they won't let you in the building. So a lot of sales calls nowadays have to be done on the phone, which is the least desirable way to do a sales call, but it kind of has to be that way now. So make a sales call, make a telephone call. You want to obviously get through what we call the gatekeeper. That's going to be the secretary or clerk or somebody that answers the phone. And you want to talk to just literally ask for whoever is in charge of shipping and receiving, or whoever is in charge of outbound freight, or sometimes receiving freight, because sometimes the receiver is who's paying the bill. Sometimes the receiver is the customer. So you want to ask for whoever's in charge of traffic, is another term you can use. Who's in charge of your traffic manager. Okay. And you want to get their name. A lot of times, and this is a sales process, this is a whole other show, but you want to go through that. You got to get through the gatekeeper, get their name. Most of the time, they're going to transfer you to their voicemail. You'll never get a call back. So the next time you call, you ask for that person by name. And you call with authority and you say, I am so-and-so, and I am calling for this person, and they're expecting my call. Right? And then now you get through to them. You're going to send emails and follow-ups, and there's a whole procedure to getting through. Again, if it was easy, everybody would do it. And if it was easy, this customer would be, this would be, right? So it's not always easy to get through to the right person. Most shippers and receivers will tell...
That's good stuff.
Yeah, and it is a sales process. Most shippers and receivers will tell you that visiting in person is preferred, or actually the best way is to meet them at one of their customers. So if it's for example, like store fixtures, things like that. Okay, that's the type of thing that we do with pad wrap and things. Store fixtures. When they go to design the store layout, they send somebody there that will literally draw on a sketch pad of how the store will be laid out and the type of fixtures that they need and all that kind of stuff. When you take the first shipment out there, that person will go there to instruct. And this setup goes here and these racks go there and that kind of thing, right? And they have somebody there that designs it all. That's the person you want to talk to. Okay, on the job, the person and you want to go in there and you want to get involved. You say, oh, you know what? I just hauled these in here, but I'm going to go get another load of these. In the next round, I'm going to have them load this in front. That way we can make sure it comes off in this order and we'll get it right in. It's faster and make it easier for you and all that. And get involved and show them your concerns and all that. And that's now they want you to be the person. Or another one we had, it was a van load and it was, fragile items. So one of our guys went out and outfitted his trailer with some extra E-Track and got some extra stuff to make sure that all these fragile items were extra well padded. Prior to us coming on, every single truck that went in there had broken stuff. We went in there and saw what the problem was. We solved the problem, and now we were their go-to carrier every time they had one of those loads. So you go in and you figure out what the problem is. You go in and you get involved, concerned, and show and express interest. One of our customers, we go to the shows and we set their equipment up for them, or we'll tear their equipment down for them. We'll do that kind of stuff and we get involved. They pay us to do it, but we're involved, and now we have ownership. We're part of the team, right? So now we are their go-to carrier.
Now, traditionally, it's the shipper that pays the freight bill. Is that correct?
Not all. Well, it depends. It's traditionally the shipper for things like flatbed stuff, but if it's building materials, it's usually the customer. The builder will pay for lumber. You pick it up at the lumber mill, you take it to the building site. It's the customer is paying for it. Grocery, reefer stuff, it's almost always the customer, the receiver, that's paying for it.
So when they receive their bill, are there two line items? Is there the cost of the product and the cost of the shipping?
Usually, yes.
In other words, what I'm at, okay.
Yeah,
I just always assumed
but
that everything was wrapped into the price of the product.
But it's sometimes it is, but a lot of times you'll see shipping and handling charges in addition to that. Remember, though, shipping and handling charges don't always just mean trucking. That might mean the packaging and the dunnage and the warehousing and the forklift operator and all that other stuff they had to pay for, too. And a lot of times, for us, we had a shipment, it was 6 truckloads. Well, the customer didn't want 6 individual invoices. So we invoiced all 6 on one invoice. So the shipping charges were one single line item for 6 truckloads. So if you saw that, you couldn't use that as your, oh, wow, this guy is paying, I could have got $60 a mile instead of $10 a mile. They're really screwing me over. But it was for 6 individual truckloads, that kind of thing. So, you have to kind of read a little more into it. But again, get involved and figure out who they are. Shippers and receivers will tell you if you meet them, like I said, at their place of business or where they're actually doing the work, or trade shows are another great one. When we get trade shows going again, and explain to them what you do and why you do it and how you can do it better. Those are the time. That's what trade shows are for. It's not just for them to sell their product, but for them to interact with other businesses. And you are a business when you go there. Now, going back to your other part is how do you set yourself apart to to brokers? Being on time is obviously a big one. Communication is probably the biggest one. So one of our guys, I wish I had a recording of him. I could play it. He goes through, and part of his pitch when he offers his rate, well, sir, I believe I have the truck for you, and we would appreciate it if you would send all the tracking links. We make sure that we do check calls and, whatever you need. If you need MacroPoint, you need us to run your app, just let us know. We'll download that. We'll do all these things for you, and we'll email you every night. We'll send you tracking links off of Google. We'll do all these different things for you. I could do that. Plus, we'll, talk to your customer. We'll talk to this person. We'll do whatever we need, and, we'll do that for $1,000. Like, that's his pitch. That's before he throws a rate out. That's what he's talking about. So brokers appreciate that because That's probably the biggest thing that brokers get kickback from is the drivers that say, I don't want to deal with tracking. I'm not putting these apps on my phone. I'm not doing that. When they don't have to deal with that and they have a broker that welcomes it, that'll set you apart. In today's environment, that's huge for these brokers.
You mean a carrier, right? Yeah. Okay. Gotcha.
As a carrier,
I like that. I'm gonna absolutely integrate that.
Yeah, as a carrier, that's what brokers want. That's what the broker wants to hear when they're booking a truck. That's how you're going to set yourself apart. Send emails for everything. Make sure you plenty of updates. Include everybody involved. Make sure the agent, the night crew, everybody, so that everybody knows what's going on all the time. So when you call in the middle of the night and you ask somebody you haven't talked to yet before, well, they can look in this email chain because they already know what's going on in there and they can read back. So that's huge.
Great. That's good stuff. Okay. Well, Kenny, one last thing, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Sir, you've been very generous with your time. As a carrier who takes on owner-operators, how do you, what methods do you use to attract owner-operators to your carrier?
I'm doing it right now. So, helping owner-operators to be successful. So when I bring on an owner-operator, I set them up with an accounting system. I teach them negotiation. I help them structure their business to the point that I give them all the tools they need to be on their own. And then at that point, it's really just referral, word of mouth. And that's all I've ever done. I've never advertised. I throw it out. I'll throw it out right now. Patriot Star, we're hiring owner operators. If go to our website or check us out, that kind of thing. But that's really all I do. Is I try not to screw anybody over. And in doing so, I hope that I have a good enough reputation out there that people want to come by word of mouth work for us, and that's what we do. Honestly, that's really all I've done. I've never advertised or anything else.
Yeah. And if you don't mind me asking it, feel free to not answer. How many trucks are under your authority?
Right now, we have 18.
And how many years have you had that authority?
Since 2012, we've been active. And we were up.
How long?
Go ahead.
How long before you got to 2?
3 years. It was Elizabeth and I running as a team.
So I'm on the Kenny Long.
Yeah.
I'm on the Kenny Long program.
Yeah, and I could take on more. Honestly, my limiting factor right now is getting trailers. I'm on a waiting list for trailers everywhere. I've got some vans and flatbeds available, but right now I'm on a waiting list to get reefers. And actually I've only got a limited supply of vans.
Can I email you about that van contact?
Sure.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I'm in the same place.
Yeah.
Maybe you can switch me back to Elizabeth and I can get your email.
Sure, I can do that. But yeah, that's the limiting factor right now. So people that have their own trailers, it's helpful when they do. But we provide training. That's the biggest thing, and word of mouth. So, but
when you said you set them up on their own accounting software, what does that look like? You meet with these prospects individually, and you kind of,
when I bring on, so here's my process. When I hire a new owner operator, and this will be, there are companies out there that will literally send the owner operator, the decals for the truck and a fuel card and stuff. They'll send it through the mail and they'll never meet them in person. All right. I can tell you over the years, I've had several, we were at 27 trucks at one point, and I've had a lot. I mean, I can't even count how many trucks we've had, over the years, coming and going, different guys getting their own authority and different things like that. Some of them I've had pull in, and when I saw the truck in person, they told me it was fantastic over the phone. When I saw the truck in person, it was that Wounded Gazelle. And before I could bring them on, I had to send them in to get, repairs done and different things like that. So I want to see every truck, and I recommend that you do see every truck in person, meet every driver in person. Part of your hiring process should be to take them on road tests. Your insurance company will probably require that you do, or at least meet with them, do a pre-trip inspection with them, and let them show you that they are qualified to drive the truck. That they know what they're doing, because a lot of them will tell you they are, and you meet them in person, you realize quickly that they have a few things they need to learn still. Okay, so it's a good idea to meet them all in person. That's the first thing I do. And I bring them in, and we have at least 2 days of orientation, which is really more business training. And I set them up with a program called TruckLogix. I think it's a great program for everybody to use, but I pay for it, for anybody that's under us, I pay for their account. And I help them. I want them to know, one of the first things I say is what's your cost per mile? And nobody ever knows that when they come in the door. And I make sure that they know it, or at least know how to calculate it when they walk out the door on the second day. And I give them that accounting software. We go over all the numbers, how that works. We talk about negotiation. We talk about how to find customers and build their lanes, and negotiate rates, and to understand rates, understand the competition, all those types of things. Those are the things that we do over the first couple of days. Then we sticker up their truck, put their ELD in, and all that kind of stuff. And it usually takes a couple of days. And a lot of times the guys want to, they've got questions like you've got, and they want to spend a third or fourth day with us.
It's great. You know what, Kenny? I'll reach out to you on Facebook, because I have your I think we're connected on Facebook. I'll reach out to you, and I'll ask you about that trailer stuff. I can't tell you how much I appreciate your time today. And yeah, you just keep doing what you're doing, man.
All right, Jerry, I appreciate it. I'm going to put you back on hold. Elizabeth can grab you. I can see she's on the waiting line here. So I'll put you right back over there with her.
Sure.
All right, thanks, Jerry. All right, if you have any other questions, comments, anything else, said we'd go an hour, but here we are, 7:45, an hour and 15 minutes already. So the lines are still open, 917-889-9924. We talked about business plans. The next thing is, and I'm going to blow through this because I want to want to wrap this up, but I talked about business plans. It took almost a whole hour just to explain that. If it takes me an hour to explain it, you should plan on at least spending a few hours writing it. Okay, so it doesn't benefit me at all to spend an hour for me to explain this to you. Okay, it would behoove you to take my advice and actually sit down and spend a few hours, maybe an hour a day for a week or two or a month, and write your plan down. At least write down the outline and write down the basic answers to those questions that would fall underneath the business plan. All right. So the next big questions, and I do have a bunch of questions that came in from from Facebook and YouTube. I am going to go back and answer most of these. And Jonathan Trimble, I saw, sent, I've never had anybody do that before, $5. So thank you, Jonathan. Okay, so the next question, and somebody asked, do they need to be an LLC to lease to a carrier? And absolutely not. Matter of fact, most of the time you don't want to be. So let's talk about the different types of business structures. You've got sole proprietor, okay? So a sole proprietor literally can be your own name, okay? So my name is Kenneth Long. It could be Kenneth Long Trucking. Doesn't require any paperwork, and I could go open a bank account today under Kenneth Long Trucking, because trucking is what I'll be doing, and Kenneth Long is my name, all right? That's it. That's my legal name, and I could go right now and start a business under that name. Nothing else required. Or I could call it something, still have the same business structure, okay? Then the check gets written to me, goes in my personal bank account, or I could open a separate business account, but it's still under my name, okay? Now, I could start what's called DBA, doing business as. I could do business as anything I want. I could create some kind of name that, I created Patriot Star. And so I could go out and create Kenny Long, DBA, Patriot Star. Still sole proprietor. I still work for myself. They could write the check out to Patriot Star, but literally it's no different than if they wrote it out to Kenny Long, okay? Still goes into my, what it would be personal account or business account, but it's in my personal name. It's all my money. It's all my liability. I don't have to worry about payroll. I don't have to worry about any of that. At the end of the year, I do my 1040 tax return. The money that comes in, I pay tax on that, and I Schedule C for the business, and do the write-offs, the depreciation, and so forth. Easy. It's the easiest structure to do, okay? For most people, unless you make a lot of money in your first year, which most people don't, that's probably the easiest way to go, all right? So either DBA or just work under your name. DBA is usually a little more preferred, especially if you want to change it, to a corporation or something later down the line. If you have a creative name, go ahead and use that. You just go to your state website usually. It's usually fairly inexpensive if you want to create that DBA name. contact the IRS. You can get an EIN number, an employer identification number. You can get an EIN number under your own name as well. As a matter of fact, if you are an owner-operator, you need to get an EIN number to pay your tax for your 2290 heavy use tax. 2290 IRS form, they require an EIN number. You can get that as a sole proprietor for yourself. You can get it under your DBA name as well, either one. And actually, you can get multiples of those for different purposes. But the next one would be a partnership. Partnership we won't talk about because a partnership is the ship that never sails. I highly recommend you do not get involved in a partnership unless it's your spouse or, I wouldn't even say that unless you're really close with a family member. That's an easy way to burn family ties, okay? Do not get involved in a partnership. Partnerships never sail, okay? The next one would be an LLC. And let me step back. The reason a partnership doesn't work is because one partner bails, the whole company really folds because the structure kind of depends on both people being involved or whoever the partners are being involved. The next step would be an LLC. Now, with an LLC, you have options. A lot of people think that they need an LLC for the liability purposes, either LLC or corporation. We'll talk about in a second. You have options with tax purposes, and there's benefits, pros, and cons. So with tax purposes, which is the main reason that you might want to do an LLC, you can structure it to be either a sole prop, which basically it's a pass-through taxation. You just have this new entity, limited liability company. It's supposed to limit your liability for exposure, for risk if there's an accident and so forth. But that's not a good reason to start an LLC. The other reason, which is the good reason to start the LLC, is because you have the option of an S corp. LLC is relatively easy, and the paperwork and record keeping is relatively easy, and you can elect with the IRS to be taxed as an S corp, which is like a sole proprietor corporation. Okay, so, and what that means is there's only one tax. Okay, the S corp files a tax return, and the profits roll into your personal tax return as income. Now, the way this benefits you for taxes is if you're a truck driver, average truck driver makes somewhere in the neighborhood of $50,000 to $60,000 a year. As an owner-operator, you might make $100,000, $150,000 or more per year. If you are a sole proprietor, you would be taxed on that full amount, payroll tax and all. Because an owner-operator is their own driver, you have driver pay and you have business pay, right? You could potentially hire a driver to drive your truck as an owner-operator. You're running a business. So you could hire yourself to drive that truck, which is what most people do. You could pay yourself driver's wages, and that's what you get taxed on for payroll purposes, your Social Security, your payroll tax, self-employment tax, people call it. And that is all that you pay on. And the remainder, so if it was a $50,000 salary, that's what you pay your tax on. The remainder, if you did $150,000 for the year, that is going to be retained earnings, and you save almost 15% taxes on that chunk of money. So it could be a substantial savings. The problem is in the first 1 to 3 years, most new businesses have so many write-offs with depreciation and startup costs and all the different things in the first few years, that those write-offs lower that taxable income down to where it's in the range where the extra cost of running payroll and the paperwork and headache of it all doesn't offset the potential savings. And it might only be, a few $1,000s difference between what's the salary amount and the retained earnings. So the tax savings might only be a few $100s, and it's easily offset by the extra cost of running payroll on yourself and so forth. So, should you do it for liability purposes? Not necessarily, unless you have other people working for you. Maybe you have another dispatcher, or you have other drivers or something. You have other people that you are responsible for. If you are the dispatcher, you do the own maintenance work. You're in charge of the driving of the truck. You're in charge of everything, right? You're head cook and bottle washer, as they say, okay? You do it all. When you're in a fatality accident, the driver will be sued. The mechanic will be sued. The dispatcher will be sued. The owner of the company will be sued. And guess what? You're all of those. So the LLC doesn't really provide a whole lot of protection for you. Now, if you had a driver that was working for you and you had a different, you always send it off to a mechanic and you've got your paperwork in order and everything is perfect, then in that case, you have a little bit of separation from what actually happened. Your company will be sued. You personally may be sued as an owner of that company, but your liability will be limited to the company itself. If you're the driver, it doesn't matter because they're going to go, you could be working for any company and as a driver get sued and lose everything. So you got to be really, really careful there. An LLC really is only helpful for the purposes of that. The next one is a corporation. Now, a corporation is actually recognized directly by the IRS. And right off the bat, they are recognized as a C Corp. Okay, a corporation is taxed twice. That's the problem with a corporation, which is why an LLC is kind of nice. A corporation is a standalone entity, completely separate from anybody that owns it. Okay, so that corporation at the end of the year files their tax return. They pay the taxes on their money, and then the income that is paid to the owners or the employees is taxed separately. Okay, so it's taxed twice. You can request for the corporation to be taxed as an S Corp. So there's an overlap between a corporation and an LLC. An S Corp is taxed, if you're a corporation or an LLC, the IRS recognizes it exactly the same way. So it doesn't matter. The only difference is, depending on the state, corporations typically have a little bit more structured record keeping. So you have to have annual meetings and you have to do a few different things. It's usually not that big a deal, but it's a little more complicated and it's sometimes a little cheaper to do an LLC for the same thing. So LLC is typically preferred. Another benefit of an LLC over a corporation, because LLCs are kind of a quasi business entity. They're not recognized equally across all state lines or federally. There's a little bit of a gray area between personal business and a corporation. Now, a corporation is recognized as its own entity. Even if it's an S Corp and the money is passed through, the corporation is recognized that way. LLC is kind of recognized that way some places, sometimes, and that's why it's a little bit of a gray area. For example, states in the Northeast impose certain taxes on certain corporations that do business in those states, like New Jersey, Pennsylvania. If you're a corporation, sometimes you have to be registered as a foreign corporation and pay taxes just because your trucks drive through that area. As an LLC, you may be able to slip through some loopholes. That being said, loopholes are easily closed. So that might be the case today, maybe not tomorrow. 5 years ago, I would have recommended everybody, 5 to 10 years ago, I would have recommended everybody get a corporation. Now an LLC seems to be better. 5 years from now, it might be a corporation is better. So really, it's a better idea. Look at your home state, look at the states you plan to be operating in mostly, and maybe talk to an attorney or two about that, and also an accountant, and ask them what their opinions are on the matter. Most of the time, though, an LLC is the preferred method, or unless you, and that's only for tax purposes if you're on your own, unless you are making less than about somewhere in the $70,000 to $80,000 taxable income. So after your write-offs, everything, $70,000 to $80,000. If you're making less than that, it's better usually to just be a sole proprietor. All right. Now, I'm going to get into 4 different things real quick. Do I need authority to lease to a carrier? No. Motor carrier authority or an MC number, or I have an MC, just carrier authority, broker authority, whatever. Do I need authority to lease to a carrier? No. The carrier has the authority. That is, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration has granted them authority to move state across state lines. You do not need an MC number authority from FMCSA if you are only working within your home state. So here in Florida, there are a lot of carriers that operate only within the state of Florida. They do not need an MC number.
90 seconds.
Other big states, and it doesn't look like anybody else has got a phone call here. If you do, you've got about 90 seconds to call in. But if you're working in another big state like Texas, for example, you could drive for days and still be in the same state, right? You could do over-the-road trucking, still be in Texas. There are a lot of intra with an A, intrastate carriers operate in states like Texas. They do not need an MC number. They need their Texas DOT number and a US DOT number. You need to be registered, but you do not need an MC number, so you do not need authority. You only need an MC number, or what we refer to as authority, if you are crossing multiple state lines, okay? And that's carrier authority. Now, do you need broker authority to get direct freight? No. As a carrier, you are authorized to work for hire to move freight across state lines. And you can get that freight from a shipper directly, a receiver directly, whoever the customer is, or through other brokers, but you can get that freight directly. What you cannot do is get that freight and hire an outside third-party carrier. If you are a carrier with authority, you can get direct freight and you can put it on your own trucks, and that's it. And that's what a carrier can do. You can lease trucks under you, and those trucks must have your name on the door. They must be on your insurance policy. Those trucks must, for all intents and purposes, be under your control. They must be your trucks, under your fleet. They can't be from some other company. And if they are under your fleet, you can put that direct freight on them. But if they are another third party, trip lease, some people lease on other carriers and so forth, it doesn't work that way. If you're doing that, you're doing what's called double brokering, and nobody likes anybody that double brokers. If you don't have broker authority, you cannot broker a load. Now, that brings me to broker authority. Broker authority, obviously, what a broker does is you arrange for the transportation of freight. You can get direct shippers, and you can hire any carrier you want to, but you don't have any trucks of your own. You can't have any trucks of your own as a broker. So you go to the shipper, receiver, you do that sales process we talked about with Jerry a little while ago. You get your foot in the door, and they let you move some of their freight. Now you can go find trucks to move that freight. Or ideally, you already have a group of trucks that you work with. You already have the list of trucks that you can call upon and the resources to move that freight. So you can do all of that. And now third-party logistics come into play, fourth-party logistics. Sometimes the broker literally has an office in the warehouse of the shipper, and you literally do all of the warehousing. The forklift operators work for you. You load the trucks. You do all of that. Third-party, fourth-party logistics. You own the warehouse in some cases, and so forth. Sometimes that crosses into another level where you actually take possession of the freight, and that's called freight forwarding. So now you get the freight, you maybe put it on some of your own trucks, or you consolidate the freight, you take it into your warehouse, it becomes your freight to move, and you are the shipper at that point. So that's a freight forwarder. It's kind of both quasi-carrier and broker, and the reason that they use that is because once it's your freight, you are authorized to ship it across international borders. It's more difficult to ship other people's stuff across international borders with you doing the paperwork, and that's a whole other show. Now, can a broker have trucks? No. Can a carrier broker loads? No. Can a carrier have broker authority? Yes and no. A carrier, you can get broker authority, but it is a separate MC number, separate business. Okay, so a carrier cannot broker loads because a carrier cannot have broker authority, with very, very few exceptions. There are grandfathered carriers that have had it before these rules went into place, and there are some carriers that have a hybrid carrier broker model, which is not advisable. Insurance companies will slaughter you for this. But most of the time, if you are a carrier, you'll have a DOT number, you'll have an MC number for your carrier, and ideally, if you wanted to start a brokerage, which is the way we did it, you would start a whole separate company, completely separate everything. This is why I have an office in Florida and an office in Tennessee. They are completely separated businesses. New DOT number, new MC number. They are not affiliated whatsoever, okay? It is possible to have a DOT number, have an MC number for a carrier, and an MC number for a brokerage. That being said, the MC for the carrier and the MC number for the brokerage, even though they might share the same DOT number, are not affiliated. So if you book a load under the carrier, you still cannot broker that load because it's under a different MC number. And there's a lot of reasons for that. There's insurance issues. It's a double brokering issue. There's a whole lot of different problems. and we'll get into that in another show. You do not need to be a broker to get direct customers. Let's see if I can get over here. All right, I am going to go through and try to go back and read all these questions real quick. And so, start at the top. This was the first question that came in. I touched on it already. I'm a company driver, would like to become an owner-operator. What's your advice? Number one, start a business plan. Number two, do not go through some type of a lease purchase on a truck. Find a truck, find the financing, and find a good deal. Don't take a truck because it's your only option. If it's your only option, it's probably a bad option. Make sure you do your research on that. Do your research on the carrier. Read their contracts. You don't have to lease to the first carrier that will give you the time of day. There are several carriers out there. Read their contracts. Figure out what they will what you will benefit from them. Like, they have the resources. How can you tap into their resources? Trucker B, what's your method for hiring drivers? I kind of talked about that with Jerry. My method, I don't advertise. It's word of mouth for us, and I bring them in for training. And I only have owner-operators, although we're talking about bringing on company drivers relatively soon. How are oversized loads quoted? Is only the cost of the permit only on a 9/6 wide multi-site? Is there extra pay to the driver? Oversized loads. Okay, so when it's oversized, it's a lot of a time factor, especially with, and this is Armando, and I hope he's still with us, but it's a big time factor for oversized loads. There's curfews, especially this time of year. You only have very short daylight hours. You can only move in daylight most of the time for a lot of loads. So that's a big thing. You know, how long is this going to be on the truck? Also, obviously, the cost of permits, the time involved in getting the permits, the extra work involved in getting the permits. Yes, there's extra pay to the driver because there's extra risk involved. If there's, and you're talking about 9'6" wide, so 9'6" wide, usually the break point is about 10. So depending on what states you're going through, you get over 10 in certain areas. There's certain routes you have to take, which adds to the time factor and mileage factor. Fuel economy obviously drops. All that plays a factor, and then it goes into the negotiation. Obviously, you want to get as much as you can for that. Martin, is it better to lease to a smaller company like North Atlantic Trucking, which is out of Springfield, or a big company like Schneider? It depends on what you're going for. Schneider has a lot of resources, but you also become a number to them. You call and, you become a truck number. A smaller company, like we mentioned North Atlantic, I don't know who they are, but for us, I know every driver. I bring every driver. I personally am the owner and president of the company. I shake hands with every driver, and we sit down and we discuss all the details. We do the orientation for a couple of days. I think, depending on your business plan, there are definitely benefits both ways. Do I need an LLC if leasing to a company? No. Do you have a business plan template? I kind of have from Apex Funding. I don't like that you got a business plan from a factoring company, because that is their hook to get you to factor with them. I think it's better if you can avoid factoring, as I mentioned. And for business plan templates, you can go to SBA.gov. They have a couple of the outline that I basically read on here and talked about, but they have a couple of sample templates for other businesses. They're not trucking businesses, but it'll give you an idea of what you should be looking for. And you can go on Google and you can find some trucking related business plans as well. Just be careful not to copy and paste. Remember, this is about trying to be unique. What can you do differently? Okay, so as far as finding customers, you can't run around in a dry van, checking the load board 100 times, hitting refresh, trying to find the highest rate, about 5 million other guys out there. One of the things in your business plan is going to be how you find customers. If you were a bank and somebody came to you and they wanted to start a new construction company, and in that paragraph they said, I am going to find my work in the classified ads. I'm going to look for help wanted ads, and I'm going to provide handyman services for people that are advertising help wanted ads in the classified section of the local paper. The bank would laugh you out of there. When you say that you find your loads on a load board, that's pretty much what you're saying. The load board is the classifieds. They're posting loads available. It's a help wanted section. They have loads they're trying to move. It's a great resource. Don't get me wrong. It's a great resource. There's a lot of analytics. There's a lot of information you can get from it. And definitely we get a lot of loads from there. But it's a classified section. You want to build those relationships. You can work with brokers. And I'm not saying don't work with brokers. But brokers, you can work with a broker even if they don't use a load board. We move most of our brokered loads without load boards at all. We call other carriers we've worked with before. We'll call other carriers in the area. We'll call other carriers that the shipper or receiver has recommended that maybe they've worked with before or that they're requesting that we call. But then after we've exhausted all of those options, then maybe we'll post it on a load board. Maybe, unless we want to just try some other things first. So a load board is like the classified ads. Look for better options than just using a load board. Okay, what about getting a DUNS number? Do you need it to build business credit? A DUNS number is helpful. Some customers may require a DUNS number, actually, especially, you start getting into some of the bigger customers, maybe Procter & Gamble, and don't quote me on this, Procter & Gamble, General Motors, some of those big, Fortune 500 type companies, they might require a DUNS number. But do you need it to build business credit? Not necessarily. And don't put a lot of effort into business credit. Even at my level, I'm running 18 trucks. I own a fleet of trailers. I own several trucks of our own. We've got huge cash flow. We've got a lot of, and I've got lines of credit. Okay. We've got 5 fuel cards now. And each one of them, I think we've got fuel card limits well over $100,000. We've got all kinds of different stuff. Even with all of that, if I request credit from somebody, I personally have to sign for it. I could get it under our business name, but an interest rate would be ridiculous. So I personally have to sign for it. It wouldn't matter if my business had credit or not. I still sign for it. I would not worry that much about a DUNS number or building business credit, rather. All right, some brokers don't pay, which is why maybe carriers prefer factoring. All right, so 2019, I did $4.8 million in business, I believe it was. $4.8 million in business, and I could tell you, I think it's close to 4,000 loads that we did, maybe more, just off the top of my head. Somewhere around that, 4,000 loads, $4.8 million in business, something. And of that $4.8 million in business, $1,200 was, I don't think we collect $1,200. The year before that, I know we didn't have anything that didn't pay. We paid everything. 2018 was a record year for us. Everything paid. 2019, I think we had $1,200 that we missed out on. And that might have actually been a direct customer that we wouldn't have factored anyway. I'm trying to remember who that was. We almost never have a broker not pay. So factoring and the non-recourse, and read the fine print on those non-recourse contracts, by the way, because if they just don't pay, because there's some other issue, unless they file bankruptcy, just a non-payment is going to get back charged to you anyway. So be careful with that. It's not a very good reason not to factor. This should be interesting. Truck drivers doing business plans. And that right there is kind of a telling statement. Truck drivers should be doing business plans. Truck drivers are owner-operators, are business owners. Business owners should have business plans. Can I add my bass boat and my $30,000 side-by-side to my business plan? Sure, if that's what you want to invest into your business. If somehow that is part of your business, then you can add that. Not getting an emissions truck to 1 million miles without getting major work done. I know several people that get 1 million miles plus out of an emissions truck. That being said, glider trucks, same thing. Maybe you get a new glider truck. There are still gliders available. Regardless of that, maybe you get a rebuilt or refurbished older truck. But the question is, do you want that? If you're leasing a truck, do you want a nice, fresh new truck, or do you want garbage? Or, to your point, if your customers are out of California, you have to have an emissions truck. So don't go buy an old beater truck and then expect to be able to lease to a carrier that does all their work out of California. I started without a clue in 2017. I have 2 paid off trucks and a paid off reefer and my own MC. I must be doing something wrong. So there are a lot of people that get lucky in this business. And there are a lot of people that just, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to make it in this business. But I will promise you that you'll be much better off if you do have a plan. Now, if you started in 2017, especially if you started in the last half of 2017, you started when we were going into an extreme record peak season. You could fall out of the truck, fall into a pile of money everywhere you went for the end of 2017 through 2018, and things started to taper off, get back to what I would call more normal in 2019, end of 2018 and into 2019. So a lot of people will tell me that they started their business in 2017 and they're still here, which is great. A lot of people started their business in 2017 and they thought that was normal. And by the end of 2018, were bankrupt or leasing to other carriers or giving up their authority or losing their trucks to the bank. Okay. All right, I'm trying to just zip through these. And I think you guys were having a conversation about what I was talking about there. I'm trying to put this all in, I should have been watching these comments as I was talking. Sorry about that. Okay, so John Trimble said something. We were talking about getting direct customers. What if the traffic manager is the person who answers the phone and you don't even know that it's them? That's definitely an option. So it's all about talking to them and figuring out, and I think we lost something here. Check. Okay. It's all about talking to them and figuring out what they know and who they are. I mean, obviously, asking who they are right off the bat is a good way to figure out who they are. Hi, my name is Ken. I'm with Patriot Star. May I ask who I'm speaking with? And what's your role there? And that's usually a way to figure out who they are. Now, they might tell you that they're just some clerk, but that's all part of the process. Okay. As far as direct customers, once you sign a carrier packet for a broker, will eliminate the possibility to haul for that shipper per their contract. It will keep you out from soliciting directly from them. Yes and no. Okay, so if you are introduced to a customer through a broker, yes, there are back solicitation issues. That being said, there are always loopholes, and that's not always enforceable in all situations. If that shipper uses multiple different brokers, for example, they put an RFQ out for every year, and that contract is up for that broker, then you can usually figure out a way around it. But there is just an ethical point there where you have to be careful not to, cut off your notes to spite your face. When you work with a broker, they are your customer. They may have put a lot of money into getting a customer. For example, I hired somebody to do sales for us, and over the course of about a year, we had to pay about $50,000 for this one particular contact. And after that, I mean, I consider we spent $50,000 really to get this one customer. Now, they're a good customer, but it was expensive for us. If somebody else was to come in that we introduced to them and they cut our throat on it, I'd be really upset about that, because we spent a lot of time and effort and money to get set up with this particular customer. So there's a reason that there are these back solicitation clauses in these contracts. So just use some ethics and a little bit of morals there, and you should be okay. And let's see. All right. I think we're about to wrap up the show here. A lot of questions about the DUNS number. And again, it'll be a long time before you establish business credit, especially in the transportation business, because it is very volatile. Banks know that. It's hard until you can establish consistent revenue over several years and you can show them your tax returns. Business credit's really a non-factor, especially in the beginning, and especially, I mean, even years down the road, they're still going to want you to be a personal guarantor. All right. And okay, as far as business credit, though, somebody says you can't build business credit if no one lends you money, or even worse, they don't report your money. Dun and Bradstreet, especially to self-report. One of the ways that you can start getting some credit in your business is a fuel card. And a lot of times in the beginning, you may have to pre-fund the fuel card, but that is basically a pre-funded credit card. Just like if you're on your personal credit, if you want to establish your own personal credit, you might get a cheap $500 or $1,000 pre-funded Visa card. And that's a way to start building your personal credit. Same thing in business. Get a fuel card. They report, and you can start that way. A lot of truck loan companies will report. Even leasing companies will report, depending on how credible they are. But that being said, you could have 100 different companies reporting great credit. You could have a whole bunch of great payment records and great revenue. They're still going to want you to sign as a personal guarantor. All right. All right. 2 questions here that I'm going to answer, and then we're going to wrap this up. Okay. And then, all right. All right, 2 questions on this. And I'm going to wrap this 3rd question in as well. Dave, if you are still on my YouTube thing, can you get rid of that person? All right, so you're new. How do you avoid factoring? And if somebody doesn't pay you, what do you do for collections? And then the other question was, what do I think about dispatch services? All right, so factoring. First of all, a lot of brokers will pay you quickly. I mentioned that. A lot of brokers have quick pay. A lot of brokers will pay you quick pay or same day or within a week or 2 with no fees. Some of these quick pay companies, even factoring companies, take 2 or 3 days to get you the money anyway. So if you figure, and the other option is to get a line of credit from your bank or even a credit card, okay? So let's look at factoring really quick. Let's say you're factoring and you get a deal of 3%, okay? Let's say you do $5,000 every week in a van, and you factor that, $5,000 a week, $20,000 a month, all right? Most brokers are paying within a week or 2, or you could quick pay. And on that line of credit, for $20,000, you could cash flow yourself for 1 month. Okay. Now, you don't necessarily have to cash flow the full $20,000. You just need enough for operating capital. So just fuel and so forth. And then after about 30 days, you'll start getting those receivables coming in. And now you have cash flow to operate on. So really you need 1 month's worth, $20,000 of operating capital. All right, so let's do some quick math. A factoring company loans you $20,000 that month. At 3% is $600 for the month. They get paid back roughly 30 days later, sometimes sooner. We're looking at our days to pay. There's several brokers that are paying within 15, 21 days. A lot of them are paying within 30 days, and they're paying ACH, so it's in the account within that 30 days. So within 30 days, the majority are paying roughly that. Some are paying, our average days to pay is like 35, and that's only because they mail a check on the 30th day, and we have it in our account by the 35th day. For that 30-day loan, they loaned you 30 days, they loaned you $20,000 for 30 days. And it's actually revolving. They loan you $5,000 the first week, $5,000 the second week, $5,000 the third week, $5,000 the fourth week. But $20,000 would cash flow that whole thing. By the time the fifth week rolls around, week one, $5,000 is coming in. All right. So at any given time, you have that revolving line $20,000 out. $20,000 line of credit would factor you if you did a full, was it $240,000 a year? Okay. So $20,000, if you did $240,000 a year, $20,000 a month, a $20,000 line of credit would cash flow your business. If you did a $20,000 line of credit at, we'll say 8% for the year, annual percentage. All right. Let's say 10%. Okay. Because, you know, maybe it's, you don't have good credit. You get 10%, even 15%, 18%. What is it going to take, right? That's at 10% is $2,000. Home loans right now are less than 3% right now, okay, for home loans. So banks are lending money. I'm not saying and advocating that you go out and take a mortgage to finance your business, but look at your options for what assets you have. Do you want to pay $20,000 into your mortgage, or do you want to put that $20,000 into your business? You have options. Where's the biggest return? I think the biggest return is on your business. I would not be against pulling money out of a line of credit on your house to run your business. I know other people are saying that's a bad idea. It's not a bad idea. The numbers work, okay? If you had a mortgage on your house and you were working to pay for your house, it's no different than you have a paid-for house, you pull money out of it, and you're still working to pay your house. It doesn't make a difference, as long as you don't overextend yourself to where you couldn't go get a job and still make the payment. But let's go back to this. Let's say that $20,000 for the year on a 10% APR, it's going to cost you about $2,000 for the year, okay? That same 20%, or $20,000 rather, right, at 3%, which is the fee that the factoring companies charge you, $600 a month, is $7,200 a year. And I'm trying to do the math real quick on what, oh, sorry. It's 36%. So 36% of the $20,000 loan. So if you wanted to, you could go to your bank, take out a loan for $20,000 and tell them a 36% APR interest rate, 36%. That does not take into account all of the fees, you know, the $1 for transferring it, $1 for processing, $1.50 each time you move the money from into their account, $1 whatever, all the different little fees, $5 for writing a check on their account, whatever it is. They have all the little fees, but just that percentage, you're paying 36% on that same revolving $20,000. So it doesn't make sense to pay 36% when you could do a much better deal or use your own money. All right, so that's the first thing. So if you can do a line of credit or work with brokers and over the first month or so, quick pay a few loads here and there. Just you only have to pay for your operating expenses, your fuel and so forth. Quick pay 2 or 3 loads in the beginning. After the first month or two, you should have enough receivables coming in consistently to cash flow your business, and you'll never have to factor. The first month might be a little bit tough. Second month will get easier. By the third month, everything's coming in on a regular basis. You should be in good shape. How do you collect if nobody pays? Number one, the chances of somebody not paying are slim to none. Number two, having a factoring company involved makes it more difficult to collect. Not every factoring company is non-recourse. If a broker goes out of business, the factoring company's non-recourse may cover it. But if they just don't pay you for some reason, the factoring company will likely charge you back. Whether there's some kind of discrepancy on the rate or there's a claim or whatever the case may be, the factoring company will hold you back. In fact, I've seen factoring companies not only hold that invoice, but every other invoice. I've seen factoring companies put big carriers out of business because of that. They will hold all the money. So avoid factoring. I'm trying to go back to that question. A few other things came in here, but all right, I'm just going to wing it and remember what it said. So avoid factoring by doing that. If somebody doesn't pay and you need to collect, you can file on their bond, one, or you can go after the shipper. You can contact the shipper, and the shipper is required to pay you directly. You'll have more success doing that than getting the factoring company to pay you. I promise you. You have resources of your own. You can flex your muscle directly to your customers if you don't work with a factor. If you work with a factor, they become the middleman. They become the person that reports everything for you. So it's better to avoid that. What do I think about dispatch services was the other question. A good dispatch service, a legal dispatch service, is few and far between. The TIA, Transportation Intermediaries Association, which is the organization, it's like OOIDA for brokers. So the TIA is requesting the FMCSA to clarify what a dispatch service is. Right now, there used to be their dispatch services were few and far between. There weren't a lot of them. Dispatch services got really popular when the FMCSA raised the broker bond to $75,000. All of a sudden, all of these brokers started they just changed their business model or their name to dispatch service. But they're still doing the exact same thing. They just don't have a bond anymore. They're basically operating without insurance or licensing. A lot of them are doing the exact same thing and don't even realize it in some cases. Here's the problem with a dispatch service. I talked about building relationships and things with your brokers. Let's say that you work with a dispatch service, you do a great job for a broker, he gets you a great rate, all this stuff. The next day, that broker remembers you, and they call back for you, and they want you on that load, but they talk to your dispatcher. You're on the other side of the country now, but your dispatcher's got somebody else in that area. They give your load from your broker, your customer, to somebody else. That's what a broker does, first of all. They have discrepancy and they can choose what carrier gets the load. A broker would do that. If they do that and they give it to another carrier and that carrier drops the ball and ruins your relationship, now that customer is never going to call back for that dispatch service, your contact number, who they think they're supposed to call. They're never going to call again. They're never going to call for your truck again because somebody else that this broker or this dispatch service gave your load to just screwed up your job, right? They screwed it up for you. You never even find out about it because you're working through a dispatch service. That's the problem with dispatch services. That, by definition, kind of makes them a broker because they have discrepancy and they can make a decision on what carrier the loads go to. And for that reason, I'm not a fan of dispatch services at all. So I hope that answers the question. There's a lot of pros and cons. I understand if you're driving, you need somebody to answer the phone for you. I don't know that a dispatch service is the best way to go. All right. Thank you, Dave, for that. And you can delete all those other ones. Anyway, I am wrapping it up with that. 2 hours is plenty for me. Have a good night, everybody. We'll try to do this again sometime in the next week or two. Elizabeth and I are on the road, team driving for the holidays. It's the only time of the year where she and I get in the truck together and run. The rest of the time we're in the office, but I'm going to try to do as much as I can. I didn't do a show last week, so you got 2 hours out of me this week. We'll see what we can do next week. With that, remember everybody, aim high, dream big, strategize your plan. We talked about plans today. Strategize your plan. You have to earn your success because you don't deserve it until you earn it. Only you drive you. Have a good night, everybody.